All right, back for another video. I'm going to continue on with this analysis. I left off last time in measures 25, so I'm going to cover around 25 to up through 30 or 31. We're going to see a lot of sequential writing in this section. With Bach, he oftentimes will use three-leg sequences and maybe begin a fourth leg of a sequence, but then use that fourth leg as it's almost like a false leg. It's transitional, and then he'll move into some new stuff, and we'll see some examples of it here. I'll play the audio so we can hear what we're analyzing, and this will be right at the beginning of measure 25. Okay, that's a good place to stop it, and let me get into this piece here, or this section. Last time I did go through measures 25 and point out the use of sequence. And in measure 25, you have these one beat legs of a sequence that has total of five legs to it. At this point in the piece, we're pretty clearly in D minor. If you want the fancy term, the piece is in A minor, so he is now at this point modulated to the minor subdominant. Fair enough. That's not, too important, I think, at this point. I just want to point out this rhetorical stuff that's happening in this section. So at the beginning of 25, you have this sequence that lasts for 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like five legs, which is pretty long. Now, to be fair, the legs are short; they're only one beat each. But you in measure 25, you have very clearly four legs, and then the beginning of 26, it looks like another leg of the sequence from 25. But what he does is he uses it as a transitional figure into a whole bunch of other legs of sequences. And let me get some yellow here. At the beginning of measures 26, 27, and 28, you have a three-leg sequence in which each leg lasts for one entire measure or four beats. And you can see at the beginning of 25, it starts on F, and then in 26, it starts on F, and then in 27, it drops a step to E, and then in 28, it drops a step to D, okay? And so the first beat of 26 is significant because that figure acts as two things. It acts as the last leg of the sequences from 25, and it also acts as the beginning of the longer sequence in measures 26, 27, and then 28. So he's using this as like this transitional leg, and it's pretty amazing the way he's doing this. He's like overlapping the sequences. Now, in measures 28, 27, and 28, do want to point out that the bass line in 28 gets busier, okay, in the first half of the measure. We have in measure 26, we have quarter notes, and in 27, again, a step down, quarter notes, so that makes sense. We would expect that. But here, it starts moving a little bit more because Bach is, again, it's the third leg of the sequence. He usually writes in these groupings of three, and he's going to transition into new stuff in measure 29. I do want to point out, though, the movement of the bass line. What really is happening here, and I've talked about this in other sections of the piece, you have, starting on the third beat of measures 27, the note F. Now, I know it's the low F, and then it jumps up to the E, but really, Bach does this a lot. He'll displace octaves. And all that's happening here on the third beat is you have, if you wrote the F an octave higher, you have F, E, D, C, B flat, etc. He's just running this scale starting on the third of the key, D minor, and just stepping down until you land on the last half of the third beat in measure 28 on the note D, and again he's just displacing the octave on the guitar, which this is for this version of the piece. This is written for the mono guitar. You don't have the low D in standard tuning, but Bach will oftentimes do this, and you shouldn't let that throw you. You'll see this big interval leap up or down of a seventh, and it looks like, there's something weird happening. Well, oftentimes he's just displacing the octave, and you can find some kind of diatonic scale happening. Now, in measure 29, we get something that we've heard before. I talked about this in previous videos, that this motive that we see on the first beat of 29, this first is heard in measure 5 and also in measure 23. The 23rd measure and the 5th measure are identical, the entire measures. Here in measure 29, the first beat is the same, but then Bach starts to move in a different direction. And what you hear on the 3rd and 4th beats of measure 29 is, lo and behold, another sequence that is 1 leg, 2 legs, 3 legs. And then here at the beginning of 31, you get what seems like a 4th leg, but it's slightly different. And he starts to transition into new stuff at the beat, in the last part of measure 30, 31, and into 32. We get more sequential stuff happening. So pretty remarkable stuff. I do want to say as well that at the beginning of 29, that figure, we first hear it in measure 5, and I talked about in a previous video how this is it's derived from the opening motive, and you may be familiar with antecedent consequent phrasing or 4-bar phrase, 8-bar period structures that are very common in the classical period, like with the music of Mozart or Haydn. But certainly Bach has elements of this as well. It's sometimes, though, not as easy to delineate or see. But what you get at the beginning of measure 5 is this motive that is related, it's rhetorical to the opening of the piece. It, in some ways, is like a retrograde or an inversion of the opening. And also, it's the beginning of the consequent of the antecedent first part of the phrase in the first 4 measures. Okay, and so what he does here is neat. He then restates the entire measure in measure 23. It's exactly the same as in measure 5, and now in measure 29, it seems like he's going to restate the whole thing again, but he doesn't. He moves somewhere else. Okay, so I think that's worth noting. All right, hope that makes sense. Please leave me a comment, and I will see you next time.